"Oh, that's just the help," my father said, smiling, in front of 22 guests at our Thanksgiving dinner. A woman had pointed at me standing in the kitchen doorway, apron on flour still under one fingernail from a 22-pound turkey I'd brined, seasoned, and roasted by myself, and asked my father, "Who's that young lady?" My father looked at her, looked at me, and answered without hesitation, "That's just the help." 2 words. He didn't even pause. 22 people heard it. My mother heard it. My sister heard it. And the man sitting 3 seats from my father, the man he'd spent 6 months trying to impress, heard it too. What my father didn't know was that man had been reporting to me every Tuesday morning for 2 years. He was my VP of operations. I was his CEO. And what happened in the next 60 seconds changed everything for my father, for his golden daughter, for the retired 2-star general sitting across the table, and for the family portrait my father had been painting for 29 years. But I'll get to that dinner. First, you need to understand the basement. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let me take you back to the house on Briar Ridge Road in a town called Ashworth, Virginia, 40 minutes from Fort Belvoir, close enough to the base that half the neighborhood flew American flags year-round and the other half flew them only on Veterans Day, which in my father's opinion made them suspect. My father, Robert Collins, retired Master Sergeant, United States Army, 22 years of service. If you asked him what he did for a living, he wouldn't say, "retired." He'd say, "served," present tense, as if the uniform was still on, just invisible. The house was a 4-bedroom colonial on a 1/4-acre white siding, black shutters, a flagpole in the front yard that Robert maintained with the same discipline he'd given convoy logistics in Iraq. Every morning at 600 he raised the flag. Every evening at sunset he lowered it. If the wind frayed the edge, he replaced it within 48 hours. The flag was always perfect. The family behind it was not. I have a sister, Chloe. She's 5 years younger than me, and in my father's eyes, Chloe was the investment, the one with potential, the one who got the bedroom with the bay window, the private school tuition at $18,000 a year, the Audi A4 on her 18th birthday, and a closet full of dresses she wore to events where Robert introduced her to people who might be useful. I got the basement. It happened the summer before my freshman year at Virginia Tech. I'd been accepted with a partial scholarship in computer science. Robert sat me down at the kitchen table, hands folded, voice level, the way he delivered all his worst decisions like a briefing. "We need Chloe's room to be bigger. She's starting at St. Catherine's in the fall. She'll need space for her desk, her wardrobe. The basement's been cleaned out. It's perfectly fine." I looked at my mother. Karen was standing at the counter drying a glass that was already dry. "Mom, your father knows best, Avery. He's been through a lot." She said it the way she said everything, like a woman reading from a card someone else had written. I moved my things downstairs that weekend. Twin bed desk, a lamp that buzzed when you turned it past the second click. The ceiling was 7 feet but felt lower because of the ductwork. The one window was at ground level, half blocked by a boxwood bush my mother refused to trim because it gave the front nice symmetry. Chloe got my room. She didn't ask for it. She didn't say thank you. She just moved in the way water fills whatever space you give it. Here's the thing about basements: you stop noticing the damp after a while. You stop hearing the dehumidifier. You even stop minding the water stain. What you don't stop noticing is the sound of footsteps above you, your father's boots in the hallway, your sister's heels on the hardwood, your mother's slippers shuffling to the kitchen at 6 a.m. An entire family living their lives 12 inches above your ceiling, and none of them ever coming down. My grandmother noticed. Margaret Collins was the only person in that house who ever took the stairs to the basement. She'd come down with 2 mugs of tea, always chamomile, always too hot, and sit on the edge of my bed like she had nowhere else to be. Which, in a way, she didn't. Margaret had been living in the guest room upstairs since Grandpa Harold died. Robert let her stay because it looked good. A devoted son caring for his elderly mother. Another flag to fly. But Margaret saw through her own son the way only a mother can, with grief and clarity in equal measure. One evening, about 6 months after I'd moved to the basement, she came down carrying something wrapped in a blue handkerchief. She sat beside me, unwrapped it slowly, and placed it in my palm. A pocket watch, brass scratched heavy for its size. The crystal was clouded at the edges, and when I held it to my ear, the ticking was faint, slightly uneven, a tiny stutter every time the second hand crossed the 4. "Your grandfather carried this through 2 deployments," she said. "Korea and Vietnam. He gave it to me the day he came home for good. Said it was the only thing that kept honest time in a dishonest place." I turned it over. On the back, scratched into the brass with something sharp, a knife maybe, or a nail, were 2 letters, H.C. Harold Collins. "I'm giving it to you," she said, "not because you're the oldest, because you're the one who works." I looked up. "Dad's going to want this for Chloe. Your father wanted a lot of things that weren't his to take." She closed my fingers around the watch. "This one's yours." Robert found out a week later. He didn't yell, that wasn't his style. He stated, "That watch belongs in the display case upstairs. It's a military heirloom. Grandma gave it to me. She's 76. She gets sentimental. She gets honest." He stared at me for 3 full seconds. I stared back. Then he turned and walked away, because in Robert Collins's house, a daughter who pushed back wasn't worth the argument. She was worth forgetting. I kept the watch, put it on my desk in the basement next to my laptop. It sat there through 4 years of college, through every late-night coding session, through every scholarship application my parents didn't know I'd filed. The second hand still stuttered at the 4. I never replaced the battery. I liked that it was imperfect. Like me. Here's what the upstairs didn't see. Chloe got SAT tutoring. I got the public library and a YouTube channel that taught AP calculus. Chloe got campus visits to Duke and William and Mary, riding shotgun in Robert's truck, while he pointed out fraternity houses like a tour guide. I got a bus ticket to Virginia Tech's open day, $27 round trip, which I paid for with babysitting money. Chloe got a graduation party with 40 people, a DJ, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Chloe," in gold letters that Robert hung himself. When I graduated from Virginia Tech with a degree in computer science, magna cum laude, the house was empty. Robert and Karen had driven Chloe to a charity fashion show in Richmond, a networking event where Chloe would meet the right people. My mother texted me at 3:47 p.m. right around the time I was walking across the stage, to no one. "Congratulations, honey. Chloe's event ran long. We'll celebrate later." They never did. I sat in the auditorium afterward, still in my cap and gown, watching other families hug and take photos and cry, the kind of tears that come from being proud of someone you love. A girl next to me was sandwiched between her parents, both of them sobbing. Her little brother held a sign that said, "My sister is smarter than me," in crooked purple marker. She saw me sitting alone and said, "Where's your family?" I told her they had another commitment. She hugged me, a stranger, in the middle of a graduation ceremony, and I let her because it was the first hug I'd gotten all day. A coworker asked me later that week why my parents weren't at graduation. "My sister had an important event," I said. "She needs the support more than I do." I said it without thinking. The way you repeat something you've been told so many times, it stops sounding like a lie. It took me years to hear what that sentence actually was, a daughter still defending the people who forgot her. After graduation, I moved back to the basement. Not because I wanted to, because Margaret was getting worse. My grandmother had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's 2 years before I graduated. By the time I came home, she was in the middle stage, good days and bad days, the good ones getting shorter. Robert's plan was to move her to a facility. "It's the responsible thing," he said at dinner one night, not looking at anyone in particular. We can't provide the level of care she needs. What he meant was, she's becoming inconvenient. I'll take care of her, I said. Robert looked at me like I'd volunteered to defuse a bomb. You don't have medical training. I have time, and she trusts me. Avery, you don't even have a real job. That sentence, "you don't even have a real job," would become his favorite. A refrain. A chorus. The song he sang every time he needed to remind me where I stood. Because here's what Robert didn't know. 3 months after graduation, while Margaret napped and the house was quiet, and the ceiling above me creaked with the weight of people who didn't notice I existed, I filed for an LLC, Ironwood Digital Solutions. The name came from the trees behind the house, old ironwood trees that grew slow and bent, but never broke. I liked the metaphor. I lived it. I started with freelance web development, then app consulting, then a contract with a local logistics company that needed their inventory system rebuilt. I worked from my basement desk, the pocket watch on my left, my grandmother's medication schedule taped to the wall on my right. By year 2, I had 3 employees working remotely. By year 3, 7. By year 5, an office I rented in Staunton that nobody in my family knew about. To Robert, I was doing something on my laptop. To Karen, I was freelancing, I think. To Chloe, I was, like, tech support or whatever. To my clients, I was the CEO who answered her phone at midnight and delivered 2 weeks early. I didn't correct my family. Not because I was hiding, because they never asked. Not once in 7 years did Robert ask what I was building. Not once did Karen sit on the edge of my bed the way Margaret used to and say, "What are you working on?" They didn't ask because they'd already decided the answer. Meanwhile, the requests kept coming. Avery, Chloe needs a new dress for the Veterans Gala. Can you chip in? $200. Avery, Chloe's car needs new brakes. The Audi parts are expensive. $1,400. Avery, we're hosting the Collinses for Chloe's 21st birthday. The country club requires a deposit. $6,500. Avery, the house needs painting before the block party. $320. I paid. Every time. Because they'd frame it the same way. If you can't contribute to this family's success, at least help your sister have a chance. And because Margaret was upstairs and I wasn't going to let money be the reason Robert sent her away, I kept a spreadsheet. Not on purpose at first, just habit. I'm an accountant by instinct, even though I'm a programmer by trade. Column A, date. Column B, amount. Column C, reason. Column D was supposed to say, "Thank you." In 6 years, column D stayed empty. The total in column B, $47,300. The number that almost broke me wasn't in the spreadsheet. It was a phone call about a year after I'd started Ironwood. Robert needed $8,000 for roof repairs. He framed it the way he framed everything, as a family obligation wrapped in a guilt trip. The house protects all of us, Avery, including you down there in the basement. I found out later the roof was fine. The money went to a credit card balance Robert had been hiding from Karen's steakhouse dinners with military contacts, a country club membership. He couldn't afford the infrastructure of a reputation he was building on borrowed time. But I didn't know that then. What I knew was that $8,000 was 2 months of salary for a developer I'd just offered a job to. A developer I needed. Our biggest client had requested a platform expansion, and I was already running the team past capacity. I paid Robert. Then I called the developer and told her the position was on hold due to restructuring. She'd already given notice at her current company. The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. It was the longest 4 seconds of my career. That night, I opened LinkedIn and searched for jobs in Arlington. Senior developer positions at mid-size firms. $95,000 a year. Benefits. A desk that wasn't in a basement. A life where nobody asked me for money I didn't have. I stared at one listing for 20 minutes. Cursor hovering over apply. Then I closed the tab. Looked at the watch. The second hand stuttered past the four and kept going. I kept going too. But that night was the closest I ever came to shutting Ironwood down and walking away from everything I'd built. Not because the business was failing, because the people above me were bleeding it dry, and they didn't even know it existed. Margaret died on a Tuesday in March, 2 years before that Thanksgiving. She went quietly the way she lived without asking anyone for anything. I was holding her hand. Robert was on a phone call in the other room. Karen was at a church meeting. Chloe was at a friend's house. I was the only one there. She looked at me near the end, and for a moment her eyes were clear. The fog lifted just long enough for her to squeeze my hand and whisper two things. The first, "Don't stay in the basement forever, sweetheart." The second, "Call Helen." Helen, my father's younger sister. The name nobody said in our house. Helen Collins now. Helen Ashford had been an army nurse just like Margaret. She'd served 8 years, came home, opened a small flower shop in Charlottesville. Robert cut her off when I was 14. The official reason changed depending on who asked. She disrespected the family. She made choices that reflected poorly on us. She didn't understand loyalty. The real reason I'd learn later was simpler. Helen had looked at Robert at a family dinner and said, "You care more about how this family looks than how it feels." He never spoke to her again. I didn't call Helen that night. I was too exhausted, too hollowed out. But I kept the name in my head next to the watch on my desk like a second inheritance I wasn't ready to open yet. Then Margaret closed her eyes. Robert's first words when he found out, I'll never forget this. He walked into the room, looked at his mother's face and said, "We should call the lawyer. She had a policy." 7 words. Not, "Was she in pain?" Not, "Were you with her?" 7 words about money. I sat there holding her hand, it was already cooling, and understood something I'd been circling for years. My father didn't lose his mother that day. He'd never had her. Not really, because you can't have someone you never bothered to know. After Margaret died, I should have left. The noble reason for staying, taking care of my grandmother, was gone. But 6 months later, Robert gave me a new reason to stay awake at night. He decided to convert half the basement into a home office. Robert had been chasing a security consulting contract for months, calling old Army contacts, printing proposals. Nobody asked for rehearsing pitches in the bathroom mirror. He needed a proper workspace. And the basement in his mind was just storage space occupied by his least important daughter. "You'll need to clear your things to the other side," he said one evening, standing at the top of the stairs. He didn't come down. He never came down. "I want it done by October." My things. He meant the desk, the filing cabinet, the tangle of cables and hard drives and equipment he'd never looked at closely enough to question. What he didn't know was that my things included servers hosting client portals for 7 companies, servers processing $180,000 in active contracts, servers that were at that moment the backbone of a company employing 11 people. Robert thought I had some laptops and old textbooks. He didn't check. Checking would have required caring, and caring would have required seeing me as something other than furniture. I spent the next 6 weeks migrating everything to a co-location facility in Staunton. $4,200 for the setup pulled from Ironwood's emergency fund. The migration happened at night in stages. I'd carry equipment to my car after midnight drive to Staunton, set up racks in a rented cage at a data center drive back before dawn. Daniel asked once why the server response times were fluctuating. "Infrastructure upgrade," I said. He didn't need to know the upgrade was caused by my father's filing cabinet. Robert got his home office. He used it for 3 weeks. Then the consulting contract fell through and the space became storage for Christmas decorations. My servers were already gone. The $4,200 was already spent. And Robert never knew that his need for a place to put a printer had nearly crashed a $1 million company. But something else happened during those midnight drives to Staunton. Somewhere between loading servers into my trunk at 2 a.m. and setting them up in a rented cage by 4 a.m., I realized the last chain tying me to this house was gone. My business no longer depended on Robert's basement. My data no longer lived under his floor. I was still here, but I could leave whenever I chose to. And when the right moment came, I would. That moment arrived on a Saturday morning in early October. Robert called me upstairs. He was standing in the kitchen in his pressed khakis and polo shirt, his important announcement outfit. Karen sat at the table with coffee she wasn't drinking. Chloe was on her phone. "I have news," Robert said. He said it the way he said everything, like a man at a podium. "General Arthur Whitmore and his family are coming to Thanksgiving." He paused, letting the name land. Karen's eyes widened on cue. Chloe looked up from her screen. "The Whitmores," Karen repeated. "The Whitmores, retired two-star. His wife Donna, and their son Daniel." Another pause. "This is the biggest opportunity this family has ever had. If we make the right impression, Arthur Whitmore could change everything for us, for Chloe." He looked directly at Chloe when he said it. Not at me. Never at me. "I want this house spotless. I want a dinner that looks like it belongs in a magazine. Chloe, you'll sit next to Daniel. Wear the blue dress." Chloe nodded, already calculating. "And Avery?" He turned to me almost as an afterthought. "I need you to handle the prep. Shopping, cooking, cleaning, decorations. Take the week off from whatever you're doing on your laptop." Whatever you're doing on your laptop. That was his way of saying your work doesn't matter, but your labor does. "I have deadlines," I said. "Move them." "I have a client call on Avery." His voice dropped into the register he used when he was done discussing. The Master Sergeant register. "This is family. Family comes first." I wanted to ask which family. The one that moved me to a basement, or the one that erased me from Christmas cards. Because that's the other thing I haven't told you yet. 3 Christmas cards. 3 consecutive years. Robert sent them to his army buddies, the annual Collins family update. Glossy photo, everyone smiling, holiday border. 3 people in every photo. Robert, Karen, Chloe. I found them by accident scrolling through my mother's Facebook. She'd posted the digital versions with the caption, "From our family to yours." I zoomed in on each one, counted the faces. 3 cards, 3 years, 3 people. I counted twice. I didn't bring it up. What would I say? Why am I not in the photo? I already knew the answer. I'd known it since I was 12, the first time Robert introduced Chloe at a Veterans Day picnic and didn't mention me. "This is my daughter," he said. Singular. But that Saturday in October, standing in the kitchen while Robert assigned me the role of invisible labor for the most important dinner of his life, something shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a bone that had healed at a wrong angle and suddenly cracked again, and this time, instead of setting it the old way, I thought maybe it's time to let it heal straight. "I'll cook," I said. "I'll prep. I'll clean." Robert nodded, satisfied. "But I'm sitting at that table, Dad. I'm your daughter, not your caterer." The kitchen went quiet. Karen's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Chloe's thumb froze on her screen. Robert looked at me. His jaw worked once, twice. Then he shrugged, a calculated surrender, not a real one. "Fine. But you're at the far end, near the kitchen, in case anything needs refreshing." He walked out. Karen exhaled. Chloe went back to her phone. I went downstairs to the basement, sat at my desk, looked at the pocket watch. The second hand stuttered past the 4 and kept going. 6 weeks to Thanksgiving. And somewhere out there, the man my father was about to build his entire evening around the man Robert hoped would look at Chloe and see a future was sitting in a conference room at Ironwood Digital Solutions, reviewing a project I'd assigned him, completely unaware that his boss lived in a basement 12 inches below the family that called her the help. But I'll get to that. The 6 weeks between Robert's announcement and Thanksgiving were the longest of my life. Not because time moved slowly, because I was living two lives at full speed, and the gap between them was getting harder to breathe in. Upstairs, I was the daughter who scrubbed grout-polished silver and drove 45 minutes to 3 different stores because Robert wanted a specific brand of cranberry chutney he'd seen in a magazine at the dentist's office. Downstairs, I was running a company through the busiest quarter of the year. 2 new client onboardings, a platform migration for a logistics firm in Northern Virginia, and a contract renewal worth $180,000 that required my signature, my attention, and my presence. On a video call every Wednesday at 4 p.m., Robert didn't know about the contract. He didn't know about the clients. He didn't know about any of it. What he knew was that his internet bill was too high. It happened on a Thursday night 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I was in the basement, laptop open, headset on, 15 minutes into a call with the operations team at Ridgemont Logistics, our biggest account. My VP of operations was walking us through the migration timeline. The CTO was asking about server load capacity. I was about to answer when the screen froze. Then the connection dropped. I stared at the spinning wheel for 5 seconds. Refreshed. Nothing. Checked my phone's signal, 1 bar. In a basement behind thick Virginia clay, 1 bar meant 0 function. I ran upstairs. The router in the living room was dark. Unplugged. Robert was sitting in his recliner reading a magazine. Casual. Deliberate. "Did you unplug the router?" He didn't look up. "You're wasting electricity on that laptop nonsense. The bill went up $40 last month." "Dad, I was on a work call." "A work call?" He repeated it the way you'd repeat a child who said they saw a dragon. Amused. Dismissive. "Avery, watching YouTube tutorials isn't a work call." I stood in the doorway, heart hammering and calculated. I could explain. I could tell him everything: the company, the employees, the revenue. I could pull up the Ironwood website on his own computer and show him. But I looked at his face, at the settled satisfaction of a man who had already decided what his daughter was worth, and I realized he wouldn't believe me. He'd find a way to minimize it, redirect it, claim it. That's what Robert did with anything that threatened his version of events. He didn't argue, he absorbed. And then he repackaged it as his own. I grabbed my car keys, drove to a coffee shop called the Velvet Bean, 15 minutes away, and called back from the parking lot at 9:47 p.m. on my phone screen, cracked one earbud in engine running for heat. "Sorry about that," I said. "Technical issue on my end." The Ridgemont CTO paused. "Is everything okay?" "Won't happen again." I saved the contract. Barely. The CTO later told my VP he'd almost pulled the account. "Another 5 minutes of dead air and we would have called your competitor." $180,000. Nearly gone. Because my father unplugged a router to save $40 a month. That night, sitting in the Velvet Bean parking lot with the engine cooling and the windshield fogging, I opened my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd saved 2 years ago but never called. Helen Ashford. My grandmother's last words had been 2 things: don't stay in the basement and call Helen. I'd followed the first one in spirit. The basement was temporary, I kept telling myself. The second I'd avoided. Not because I didn't want to talk to Helen, because I was afraid that talking to her would make everything real. That the moment someone outside this house acknowledged what was happening inside it, I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. I called. 3 rings. Then a voice, warm, slightly hoarse, like someone who spent her days talking to flowers and didn't mind if they didn't answer back. "Hello. Helen, it's Avery. Avery Collins." A pause. Not the confused kind. The kind where someone has been waiting for a call for a very long time and needs a moment to believe it's real. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice cracked on the second word. "Your grandmother told me you'd call eventually. I just didn't think it would take 2 years." We talked for an hour in that parking lot. The windows fogged completely. I couldn't see the streetlights anymore. Just shapes. It felt appropriate, like the world outside had blurred so the conversation could sharpen. Helen knew more than I expected. Margaret had told her about Ironwood before the Alzheimer's took her clarity. Not details, just enough. "Your grandmother said you were building something real," Helen told me. "She said you were the one who worked." The same words Margaret had said when she gave me the watch. Even from inside the fog, she'd been passing the message forward. "She wrote you a letter," Helen said quietly. "Gave it to me 3 months before she passed. Made me promise to hold it until her words, 'The truth comes out.'" "What does it say?" "I haven't read it. It's sealed." Margaret was very specific. "Give it to Avery when it matters." I gripped the steering wheel. "Does it matter yet?" Helen exhaled a sound that carried 15 years of silence in it. "I think it's getting close." She didn't push me to leave. She didn't offer solutions. She did something harder. She listened. And when I told her about the Christmas cards, about the $47,300, about the router, she said something I've never forgotten. "Your father builds display cases, Avery. Beautiful glass boxes where everything looks perfect and nothing is real. The problem is you can't live inside a display case. Eventually someone taps the glass and the whole thing shatters." Before we hung up, I told her about Thanksgiving, about General Whitmore, about Robert's plan to impress him. Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, not cruel, not bitter, just the tired laugh of a woman who'd seen this movie before. "Which brings me to Daniel. Daniel Whitmore, VP of Operations at Ironwood Digital Solutions. The man my father wanted as a son-in-law for Chloe. The man who every Tuesday at 9 a.m. sat across from me on a video call and reported project timelines with the precision of someone who'd grown up in a military household but chose to leave it. I hired Daniel 2 years before that Thanksgiving. He'd applied through a job board, no referral, no family connections. His cover letter said one sentence I've never forgotten: "I want to work somewhere that values what I build, not where I come from." I liked that sentence. I hired him within 2 weeks. Daniel was good. More than good, the kind of employee who made you look smart for hiring him. He also had a habit of sending memes to the company Slack at 2 a.m. A cat in a business suit. A flowchart titled, "Should I reply all si show?" that ended every path at no. I messaged him once, "Daniel, you're a VP. Act like one." His reply, "VPs need memes too. It's in my contract." I wrote your contract. It's not. Then consider this a formal amendment request. D. He had a habit of ending meetings by saying, "The smartest person in any room is the one who built it." He said it like a throwaway line. He had no idea that for me, the person who had literally built her company in a basement room with a stuttering watch and a water stain shaped like Florida, that sentence landed different every time. I never told Daniel about my family. At work, I was Avery Collins' CEO. Nobody at Ironwood knew I went home to a house where my father called my work laptop nonsense. Daniel didn't know my last name was the same Collins as the family his parents were about to visit for Thanksgiving. Collins is common. Virginia is full of them. That firewall was about to collapse. 4 days before Thanksgiving, Robert's operation went into full deployment. He handed me a list, handwritten, numbered in the block capitals he'd learned in the Army. 23 tasks. I counted them twice because the number felt like a punchline. Deep clean entire first floor. Polish all silverware used grandmother's set. Purchase groceries list attached 3 pages. Test recipe herb-crusted turkey practice run Tuesday. Iron Chloe's blue dress plus backup dress. Pick up flower arrangements Wegmans pre-ordered. Set dining table for 22 seating chart attached. Clean guest bathroom new towels. Wash and press tablecloth. 10 to 23 more of the same. Vacuum dust arrange, prepare, serve. 23 tasks. All for me. Chloe's assignment for the same 4 days: choose accessories, get a blowout, and rest. Because I need you fresh for Thursday. I looked at the list. I looked at my laptop where 14 employees were waiting for decisions on 3 active projects. I looked at the pocket watch on my desk. Then I pulled up my calendar and started canceling meetings. 4 days. $23,000 in billable hours I wouldn't be collecting. The equivalent of Chloe's entire credit card debt, a number I wouldn't learn until later, but the symmetry would haunt me when I did. Have you ever kept count of what you gave to people who never said thank you? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still here, hit that like button. By Monday night, the house was spotless. By Tuesday, I'd practice roasted a turkey that Robert taste tested without comment, which in his language meant approval. By Wednesday morning, I was arranging chrysanthemums in the dining room and polishing wine glasses when Chloe walked downstairs in yoga pants and a face mask holding her phone like a scepter. Have you seen my curling iron? I think it's in the basement. It's in your bathroom, top shelf. She didn't say thank you. She turned and walked back up, and I heard her heels on the hardwood above me, the same sound I'd been hearing for 11 years, the sound of someone living above you in every possible sense of the word. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, this is Chloe's sister, right? Sorry, weird question. I just met Chloe at the Copper Kettle. She mentioned her older sister works in tech. I think I might know you professionally. Daniel W. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the basement stairs and read it a 4th time because my hands were shaking, and I needed to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Daniel had met Chloe. Robert set up the casual coffee shop run-in he'd orchestrated as a pre-Thanksgiving warm-up. I should have expected it. Robert was thorough. He wouldn't wait until Thursday to make an impression. He'd stage an early introduction, let Chloe dazzle soften the ground. I called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Avery. What did Chloe tell you? A beat. She said her older sister does some freelance stuff, websites or something. Then she laughed and called you the family tech support. I closed my eyes. Avery is your family, are you? Robert Collins's daughter, the one who invited my parents for Thanksgiving. Yes. And Chloe is your sister? Yes. And your father, the man my parents are having dinner with in 2 days. He doesn't know you're my boss. He doesn't know I have a company, Daniel. Silence, the kind that recalibrates everything. How long? He said quietly. How long has this been going on? Which part the company he doesn't know about? Or the daughter he pretends doesn't exist? Both. 7 years for the first, 29 for the second. I heard him exhale. Not the sharp exhale of surprise, the slow one of someone putting pieces together and not liking the picture. What do you want me to do? Nothing. Come to dinner. Be polite. Don't mention Ironwood. Don't mention me. This is my family, Daniel. I'll handle it. Avery. I mean it. Whatever happens Thursday, it's mine to deal with. He was quiet for a long time, then, okay, I won't bring it up. But Avery, if he crosses a line, I'm not going to sit there and pretend I didn't hear it. Daniel, I know what you're going to say. It's not your fight. But I've sat in rooms with you for 2 years. I've watched you manage crises at 2 a.m. close deals that companies 3 times our size couldn't land and build something from nothing that actually works. And the whole time you were going home to people who thought you were doing tech support. His voice wasn't angry. It was something worse. It was clear. You're the best leader I've ever worked for. And I include my father in that comparison. So no, I won't bring it up. But I won't pretend I didn't hear it if something happens. I didn't know what to say. So I said the thing I always said when someone showed me more respect than I was used to. Thank you, Daniel. Then, because I was still me. And stop sending memes at 2 a.m. It's unprofessional. It's self-care. Neat. It's a cat in a business suit. That cat has better posture than half our clients. I laughed. For the second time in a week, someone had made me laugh. I was beginning to think it was a sign, or at least a pattern worth continuing. Wednesday night, the night before Thanksgiving. The house was ready. 22 place settings on a table that had taken me 3 hours to arrange. The seating chart, which Robert had drafted like a military operation, placed General Whitmore at his right hand, Donna Whitmore across Daniel next to Chloe and me at the far end nearest the kitchen door. Close enough to refill platters. Far enough to be forgotten. Chloe's blue dress hung on the back of her door, pressed and steamed. The backup dress, a wine-colored wrap, hung beside it. Both cost more than my first server rack. Karen had spent the evening rehearsing conversation topics from a list Robert had printed. Topics that were Whitmore-friendly military service real estate, the new development in Fauquier County, Chloe's event planning career, which, as far as I could tell, consisted of organizing one bachelorette party and managing a Pinterest board. Robert made his final inspection at 9 p.m. He walked through every room like a general reviewing troops before deployment, adjusted a napkin fold, straightened a candle, paused in front of the china cabinet where grandmother's good dishes were displayed behind glass. Then he opened the cabinet, reached to the top shelf, and pulled down the pocket watch. My pocket watch. The one I kept on my desk. The one Margaret had given me. He must have gone to the basement while I was shopping and taken it. "This will go in the display case by the front door," he said, placing it on the dining table. "Arthur Whitmore served in the same era as your grandfather. He'll appreciate the heritage." I stared at the watch on the white tablecloth. My grandfather's watch, the one that stuttered at the 4, the one Margaret placed in my hands with the words, "This is for the one who works." Robert was going to display it like everything else in this house to impress a stranger. "That's mine," I said. "It's a family heirloom. It belongs where people can see it." "Grandma gave it to me." "Grandma's gone, Avery." He said it without cruelty, which made it crueler. Just fact. Just logistics. The same tone he'd used 2 years ago when she died. "We should call the lawyer. She had a policy." I picked up the watch from the table, held it in my closed fist, felt the tick against my palm, faint, uneven, alive. "It stays with me." Robert's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he'd push. But he looked at the clock, 9:14 p.m., less than 15 hours until guests arrived, and made the calculation. This wasn't worth a scene. Not tonight. Not before the Whitmores. "Fine," he said, "but I need you in the kitchen by 6 tomorrow morning. Turkey goes in at 7. He walked out. Karen followed without looking at me. Chloe was already upstairs, face mask on, phone glowing. I went to the basement, sat at my desk, put the watch back in its place next to my laptop. The screen showed 3 unread Slack messages, 11 emails, and a calendar reminder. Ironwood Q4, review, Monday, 9 a.m. 2 days ago, Daniel had promised not to say anything. Helen had told me the truth was getting close. Margaret had written a letter I hadn't read yet. And tomorrow, 22 people were going to sit at a table my father had built like a stage set, and he was going to perform the role of a proud patriarch with one accomplished daughter and a woman who helped around the house. I looked at the watch. The second hand stuttered past the 4. I picked up my phone and texted Helen. 4 words. "Tomorrow. Can you come?" Her reply came in 11 seconds. "I've been waiting 15 years for that invitation." I set the phone down, looked at the ceiling. The footsteps had stopped. The house was quiet. Everyone upstairs was sleeping, dreaming maybe about the perfect evening they were about to have. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't dreaming. I was sitting in a basement with a grandfather's watch and a company they didn't know about, and a guest list that included my VP, my estranged aunt, and a letter from a dead woman who'd seen all of this coming. Tomorrow my father was going to introduce me as the help, and for the first time in 29 years I was going to let the truth introduce itself. Thanksgiving morning. 6:47 a.m. The alarm didn't wake me because I hadn't slept. I stood in the kitchen in the dark, tying my apron, listening to the house breathe. The turkey sat in the refrigerator, brined and ready. The sweet potatoes were peeled. The cranberry chutney, the specific brand Robert had made me drive 45 minutes for, sat on the counter beside a pie I'd baked at midnight because Karen had forgotten to tell me we needed one until 10 p.m. Nobody else was awake. Nobody else needed to be. The performance was mine to build. They'd just walk onto the stage. And somewhere around 8 a.m., standing at the counter, hands dusted with flour, alone in a kitchen where I'd cooked hundreds of meals for people who never said thank you, I cried. Not sobbing, not dramatic. Just tears falling onto the countertop, mixing with the flour dust, disappearing into the surface like they'd never been there at all. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was tired. 6 years of tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones, in the space behind your eyes, in the part of your chest that used to hold hope and now just holds weight. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, touched the countertop with both palms the way you'd touch the ground after a long fall, just to make sure it's still there. Then I kept cooking, because that's what I did. I kept going. By 10 a.m., the turkey was in the oven. By 11, the house smelled like rosemary and brown butter and something I couldn't name, maybe the scent of a woman trying to hold her life together with both hands while cooking for people who didn't know she had one. Karen came downstairs at 11:15 in a silk blouse and pearls. She inspected the table, adjusted one fork that didn't need adjusting, and said, "The flowers should be lower. Robert wants people to see each other across the table." I trimmed the chrysanthemums. She watched. Then, as she turned to leave, "Try to keep a low profile today, Avery. This is important for your father." Low profile. In a house I'd cleaned for 4 days. At a dinner I'd cooked from scratch. At a table I'd set for 22 people, not one of whom knew my name would be worth remembering. Chloe descended at noon. The blue dress, pearl earrings, hair blown out to a shine that probably cost more than my monthly phone bill. She looked like the cover of a magazine Robert would leave on the coffee table, beautiful, polished, and entirely for display. "How do I look?" she asked, turning once. "Like $1 million." She smiled, not catching it. Or maybe catching it and not caring. With Chloe, I could never tell. Then she went to the living room to practice sitting on the couch in a way that looked effortless. She actually practiced. I watched her adjust her posture 3 times, crossing her legs, uncrossing, tilting her chin, finding the angle that said, "I belong here," without appearing to try. The entire performance of ease rehearsed like a monologue. Her contribution to a dinner for 22 people looking the part. Mine, everything else. Robert appeared in full form at 12:30. Pressed navy blazer, American flag pin on the lapel, shoes polished to a mirror shine. He walked through the house one final time, straightening pictures, centering coasters, making sure every surface told the story he wanted. He stopped in front of me, looked at my clothes, dark jeans, a black blouse, simple flats. The nicest things I owned that weren't a blazer I wore on Zoom. "That's what you're wearing?" "Yes." He opened his mouth, calculated, and closed it. "Not worth the argument. Not today." "Stay near the kitchen," he said. "If anything needs refreshing, handle it quietly." I nodded, touched the pocket watch in my jeans pocket. The brass was warm from my body heat. The guests arrived in waves. First, the couples, the Warrens from 2 doors down, Cousin Ray and his wife Darlene, Colonel Briggs and his wife Margaret, a name that hit me in the chest every time someone said it, and 2 other military families from the base community. Second, Pastor David and his wife Ruth carrying a casserole they always brought and nobody ever ate. Third, at precisely 1:00 p.m., a dark blue Suburban with government plates pulled into the driveway. Robert was at the door before the engine stopped. General Arthur Whitmore stepped out first. Tall, silver-haired, a bearing that said he'd spent 35 years in rooms where his presence changed the temperature. His wife Donna followed warm smile pearl necklace, the quiet confidence of a woman who'd hosted ambassadors and didn't need to prove it. Then Daniel. He wore a charcoal sport coat over a white shirt, no tie. He looked like what he was, a man who'd left the military path but couldn't quite shake the posture. His eyes swept the house, found me standing in the kitchen doorway. A look passed between us. Less than a second. An entire conversation. "I'm here. I know. Don't worry." Robert was already in motion. Handshake with the general, double grip, the kind that says, "I've practiced this." Shoulder pat. "Arthur, Donna, welcome. We are honored, truly honored." He guided them inside. Introduced Karen, who performed beautifully, hand-steady, smile-wide talking points deployed. Then Chloe, who stepped forward in the blue dress like a debutante at a cotillion. "This is my daughter Chloe. She's been looking forward to meeting you, Daniel." Daniel shook Chloe's hand. Polite, professional. Not a trace of the man who sent memes at 2 a.m. "Nice to meet you." Chloe smiled, the smile Robert had been training her for since she was 15. "I've heard so much about you." "Have you?" Daniel said. Just that. 2 words. But his eyes flicked to me for a quarter of a second. Dinner started at 2 o'clock. 22 people around a table I'd set with Margaret's china, the white plates with the gold rim that only came out when Robert wanted to impress someone. Candles lit, wine poured, napkins folded into shapes I'd learned from a YouTube video at 1 a.m. The first 40 minutes passed without incident. Robert held court at the head of the table, steering conversation toward topics where he could shine his service record, the local Veterans Committee, a property development he was exploring. General Whitmore listened, politely asked questions, gave nothing away. Donna complimented the turkey. I said thank you from the far end of the table, and nobody followed up. Daniel sat between Chloe and Donna. Chloe talked. Daniel listened. I watched from my assigned seat near the kitchen door, refilling water glasses when they got low, clearing appetizer plates, doing the work nobody noticed, because it was designed not to be noticed. Then Robert stood up. He tapped his glass with a knife. The room quieted. He had the look, chest out, chin up, the performance mask locked in place. "I want to say a few words of thanks," he said. His voice carried that warm commander tone he used for audiences. "For this house. For this country. For the men and women who served it, present company very much included." A nod to General Whitmore. The general nodded back. Polite. Reserved. "And for my family," Robert continued. He put his hand on Karen's shoulder. "My beautiful wife who makes this home what it is." Karen beamed. "And my daughter." He turned to Chloe, and the pride in his voice was real, which made it worse. "Chloe, who makes us proud every single day." Applause. Warm. Automatic. Chloe dipped her head with practiced modesty. Robert wasn't done. But he was finished with me. The applause faded. The eating resumed. And then, about 20 minutes later, I stood up to bring out the second round of sides from the kitchen. Sweet potato casserole, green beans, a fresh basket of rolls. Colonel Briggs, a man who'd been watching me move between the kitchen and the table all afternoon, set down his fork and turned to Robert. "Robert, who is that young lady? She's been doing a hell of a job today." A reasonable question. A simple question. A question that in any normal family would have a simple answer. "That's my other daughter, Avery." Robert smiled. The teeth and no warmth smile. "Oh," he said. "That's just the help." He said it with a chuckle. "The way you'd explain a piece of furniture. That's just the ottoman. That's just the side table. That's just the help." Colonel Briggs blinked. Donna Whitmore's hand stopped halfway to her wineglass. Pastor David looked down at his plate. Karen busied herself with a napkin she'd already folded twice. I was standing 3 feet from the table, holding a casserole dish with both hands. 22 people in the room. Every one of them heard it. The help. Not my daughter. Not Avery. Not even she lives with us. The help. I set the dish down on the table. My hands were steady. My blood was not. I felt something behind my ribs. Not pain, not anger, something structural. Like a load-bearing wall that had been cracking for 29 years finally gave way, and the whole architecture of silence I'd built around myself shifted. Daniel's glass hit the table. Not slammed, placed. Deliberately. The way you put something down when you need both hands free. "Sir." His voice cut through the room. Not loud. Clear. Robert turned, still smiling, still performing. "Yes, Daniel." "She's not the help." The smile flickered. "She's my boss." 22 people. Not one of them breathing. General Whitmore turned to his son. "Excuse me." Daniel looked at his father, then at me, then back at Robert. "Avery Collins is the founder and CEO of Ironwood Digital Solutions. I've been working for her for 2 years. She's my direct supervisor. She runs a company with 14 employees and over $2 million in annual revenue." He paused. "And she is without question the best leader I've ever worked for." He didn't add, "including you, Dad." He didn't need to. Everyone heard it anyway. Robert's face went through 4 expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, denial. And then, something I'd never seen on my father's face before: fear. That's not Avery? Doesn't—" I untied my apron. Not fast, not dramatic. I pulled the bow at the back, folded the apron once, and set it on my chair. Then I stood straight, and for the first time in 29 years I spoke to my father the way I spoke to a boardroom. Since my father just introduced me, let me finish the introduction. The room was airless. "My name is Avery Collins. I'm 29 years old. I'm the founder and CEO of Ironwood Digital Solutions. We provide technology infrastructure for logistics and operations companies across Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic. May." My voice was level. No shake, no crack. The voice I used on client calls. The voice I'd practiced in a basement for 7 years. "We have 14 full-time employees. Our annual revenue last year was $2.1 million. Daniel Whitmore has been my VP of Operations since year 1. He reports directly to me." I let one beat pass. The company was built in the basement of this house. The room my father gave me because I wasn't worth a bedroom upstairs. Karen's hand went to her throat. Chloe's mouth opened and didn't close. Cousin Ray leaned back in his chair like he was trying to physically distance himself from the blast radius. Robert found his voice. "Avery, this isn't the time. You made it the time, Dad. You stood up in front of 22 people and called me the help. Now I get to tell them who I actually am." I reached into my pocket and placed the pocket watch on the table. The brass caught the candlelight. The second hand stuttered past the 4. This watch belonged to my grandfather. Grandma Margaret gave it to me when I was 11. She said it was for the one who works, not the one who performs. I looked at Robert. "Last night you took it from my desk. You wanted to put it in a display case to impress General Whitmore. Like everything else in this house, it was decoration to you. To me, it was a promise." General Whitmore was watching, not with shock, with the calm, assessing focus of a man who'd spent his career evaluating people under pressure. His eyes moved between me and Robert like he was reading a situation report. "And the money," I said. Not louder, quieter. "In 6 years, I gave this family $47,300 for Chloe's dresses, for house repairs, for birthday parties I wasn't thanked for. I kept a spreadsheet. Every dollar, every date, every reason." I paused. "There's a column for thank you. 6 years. 0 entries." Robert's chair scraped as he stood. "That's enough. You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Dad. I'm embarrassing you. There's a difference." The front door opened. Nobody had knocked. Nobody had rung the bell. The door simply opened and Helen Ashford stepped inside. She wore a gray wool coat, her silver hair pulled back, and she carried a single envelope cream-colored sealed with Margaret's handwriting on the front. Robert went white. Helen. His voice cracked on the name the way a frozen pond cracks when the weight hits the wrong spot. You weren't invited. Neither was the truth, Robert. But here we are. Helen walked past Karen, past Chloe, past the frozen faces of 22 guests who had just watched one revelation and were now watching another. She stopped beside me, looked at me the way Margaret used to, like she already knew how the story ended and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. Then she placed the envelope on the table next to the pocket watch. Your grandmother wrote this 3 months before she died. Helen said, her voice steady. She gave it to me and said, give it to Avery when the truth comes out. I think tonight qualifies. I picked up the envelope. Margaret's handwriting, that cramped, careful script I'd grown up reading on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the medication schedules she taped to my basement wall. I opened it, inside a single piece of paper. I read it once in silence. Then, because the room was listening, because Margaret deserved to be heard one more time, I read it out loud. Avery, if you're reading this, it means someone finally told the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better while I was there. Your grandfather's watch keeps time even when it stutters. So will you. Don't stay in the basement forever, sweetheart. Build something. Grandma M. The room was silent, not the polite silence of people waiting for their turn to speak. The heavy silence of people who understood they'd been watching a lie for years and only just realized it. Robert tried one more time. The last attempt of a man whose display case had shattered. She was on medication when she wrote that. She wasn't, her mind wasn't. Her mind was fine when she wrote this, Helen said. I was there. She was lucid. She cried while she wrote it, Robert. She cried because she knew exactly what you were doing to your daughter and she couldn't stop it. Robert looked at Helen, his sister, the woman he'd cut off 15 years ago for saying out loud what everyone else was thinking. She was standing in his dining room in front of his guests next to his daughter, holding the evidence his mother had prepared from beyond the grave. And then he went still. Not the stillness of composure, the stillness of a machine that had run out of instructions. His hand remained on his water glass. His spine remained straight. But his eyes, those sharp, commanding eyes that had looked down at me from the top of the basement stairs for 7 years, moved. Slowly, systematically, the way they must have moved when he assessed terrain in the field. He looked at Daniel, standing, certain. He looked at General Whitmore, seated, verdict forming. He looked at the guests. The Warrens, Colonel Briggs, Pastor David, Cousin Ray, all watching him with expressions that ranged from discomfort to something closer to revision. 20 years of Veterans Day speeches and neighborhood barbecues, all being recalculated in real time behind 20 pairs of eyes. He looked at Chloe, frozen in her blue dress. The investment that was supposed to pay off tonight, sitting mute, beautiful, and useless. He looked at Karen, who had nothing to offer. No script for this. No strategic silence that could absorb this much truth. And then he looked at me. I watched him do the math. The same cold calculation of assets and liabilities of what's been lost and what can't be recovered. He couldn't call Daniel a liar General Whitmore would verify in a phone call. He couldn't claim he'd known about my company. Every person at this table had heard him say, "The help," without hesitation. He couldn't turn it into a joke. Nobody was laughing. He couldn't blame me. I hadn't started this. He'd started it the day he moved me to the basement. Checkmate doesn't happen with a crash. It happens with silence, with the quiet recognition that every square is covered, every piece is pinned, and the king has nowhere to go. Robert Collins, retired Master Sergeant Patriarch Performer, stood at the head of his own dinner table and had nothing left. General Whitmore stood, buttoned his jacket. The small, deliberate gesture of a man who'd made his assessment. He looked at Robert. For a long time. The way a commanding officer looks at a subordinate who has just failed an inspection, not with rage, but with the specific disappointment reserved for men who should have known better. "You've got a hell of a daughter, Collins," he said. His voice was low, steady, unhurried. A voice shaped by decades of delivering news that changed lives. "And you put her in the kitchen." He let those words sit, then quieter. "You told me your family reflected your values. I believe you. Every single thing I've seen tonight reflects exactly who you are." He turned to me. A slight nod. Not warm, not cold. The nod of one professional to another. "Ms. Collins, your grandmother would be proud." He placed his hand on Donna's back. She stood, took Daniel's arm, and they walked to the door. At the threshold, Daniel turned and looked at me. Not a word. Just a look that said, "I told you I wouldn't pretend." Within 10 minutes, the table emptied. Pastor David and Ruth quiet, quick. Colonel Briggs shook my hand on the way out, a firm grip, a single nod, the military shorthand for respect. The Warrens. Cousin Ray, who couldn't get his coat on fast enough. Darlene, who whispered, "I'm sorry," to me as she passed, which was more than anyone in my immediate family had said in 6 years. 22 guests became 6, then 4, then 3. Robert, Karen, Chloe, sitting at a table set for 22. Candles burning down, turkey getting cold. The display case finally completely empty. I looked at my father. He was sitting at the head of the table, hands flat on the cloth, staring at a spot between his plate and his wine glass. The patriarch of a room with no one left in it. Nobody spoke. For a long time, nobody spoke. The candles flickered. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked through seconds that felt like minutes. The turkey sat in the center of the table, half-carved, cooling, magnificent, and pointless like everything else Robert had built tonight. I picked up the watch, picked up the letter, put them both in my pocket. Robert's mouth opened. "Avery, you could have... When, Dad?" My voice was level, not angry, not cold, just clear. The voice I used on client calls, the voice I'd practiced in a basement for 7 years. "When should I have told you? When you moved me downstairs, when you stopped putting me in the Christmas cards, when you unplugged the router because you thought I was watching YouTube." I paused. "You never asked, not once in 7 years. You never came downstairs and asked what I was building." He had no answer, because there was no answer. "I'll be out of the basement by Sunday. Not because you asked. Because I should have left the day Grandma died." Robert didn't look up. Karen was crying, real tears, the kind she couldn't repurpose as currency. Chloe sat perfectly still in her blue dress, pearl earrings, catching the candlelight, looking for the first time in her life, like she didn't know what role to play. I walked to the front door. Helen was on the porch. She was standing where she'd been standing for the last few minutes, hands in her coat pockets, watching the November sky turn from amber to gray. She hadn't come inside for the full ending. She delivered the letter and stepped back, because Helen Ashford had spent 15 years learning that you don't need to be in the room to change what happens in it. But she was shaking, not from the cold, from something older. Something that had been locked inside her since the day Robert told her she wasn't welcome in this family anymore. I stood beside her. We didn't speak for a while. The porch light buzzed. A car started down the street. Somewhere inside, a chair scraped against the floor. Then Helen turned to me and her face broke. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way a dam breaks when the crack has been there for years and one small thing, a ripple, a touch, a word, finally lets the water through. "I should have done what you did," she said. Her voice was hoarse. 30 years ago, when he started with me, I should have stood at that table and said something. "You were alone, Helen. So were you. I had Grandma's letter. I had Daniel. I had you showing up tonight." She shook her head. "You had yourself. That's what I didn't have. I ran Avery. I left this house and I never came back, and I told myself that was strength, but it wasn't. It was survival. What you did in there. Her voice cracked. That was strength. She pulled me into a hug. Not the polite shoulder pat kind, the kind where someone holds on because they're holding on to more than just you, they're holding on to every version of themselves that never got this moment. I felt her cry against my shoulder. Quiet sobs, 15 years of silence coming out in small shaking waves. And I understood something standing on that porch. This wasn't just my story. It was Helen's story. It was Margaret's story. 3 generations of women in the same family under the same man, and the pattern had finally broken. Not because I was braver than Helen or smarter than Margaret, because I'd had what they didn't time to build something that couldn't be taken away. Helen pulled back, wiped her eyes, laughed a short, wet, surprised sound. "Your grandmother would have loved this," she said. "She planned half of it." "That sounds about right." I drove to Helen's house that night, slept in her guest room. The sheets smelled like lavender and old books, and for the first time in years I slept without hearing footsteps above me. I moved out of the basement on Sunday as promised. It took one trip. Everything I owned fit in my Subaru Impreza and the back of Helen's station wagon. The servers I'd already migrated to a co-location facility in Staunton months before the last practical chain tying me to that house, already severed without Robert knowing. I didn't say goodbye. I left the key on the kitchen counter next to the apron. The fallout was specific and measurable. In a town like Ashworth, 22 guests meant 22 households. Each household told 5 more. By the following Sunday, Pastor David's sermon was about the sin of pride, and everyone in the congregation knew exactly who he meant. Robert stepped down from the Veterans Committee. Not voluntarily. Colonel Briggs called and suggested it. "Take some time, Robert. Focus on what matters." Translation: we've seen the real you. Don't come back until we've forgotten. Karen's Bible study group stopped meeting at the Collins house. One of the women told another woman who told her hairdresser who told Helen, "We can't sit in that dining room anymore. Not after what happened at that table." Robert's property development deal, the one he'd been hinting about to General Whitmore all evening, collapsed when his local partner pulled out. "I heard some things," the partner told a mutual friend. "I need people I can trust." The man who had spent 22 years building a reputation in Ashworth watched it dismantle itself in 22 days. Not because anyone attacked him, because the truth did what it always does when you've been lying long enough. It catches up, and it brings receipts. Chloe called me 8 days after Thanksgiving. I almost didn't answer. "I didn't know about the Christmas cards," she said. Her voice was flat, emptied out like someone had pulled the plug on the performance, and what was left was just a person small and confused. "I swear, Avery, I didn't know he left you out." I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, because I didn't know what to say. "I'm $23,000 in credit card debt," she said quieter. "Dad doesn't know. I've been keeping up the clothes, the nails, the events, all of it because he expected me to. Because that was my job. Look right, smile right, be the one worth showing." A pause. I heard her breathing. "He made me into a mannequin, Avery, and I let him. I didn't even know it until I watched you stand up at that table and I realized I've never stood up for anything. Not once. Not for myself. Not for you." I closed my eyes. "You weren't the villain, Chloe. I wasn't anything. That's the problem." I didn't forgive her. Not that day. There was too much distance between us, too many years of her heels on the hardwood above my head. But I heard her. And hearing is the first step to something, even if I didn't know what yet. 3 weeks later, Chloe called again. Her voice was different this time, stripped bare, no sugar, no performance. Robert had cut her credit card. Not suspended. Canceled. "I don't have any money," she said. "Like any. I've never paid a bill in my life. I don't even know what a billing cycle is. I waited. Chloe never called to share feelings. She called to get things. Can you give me a job at your company? I can do, I don't know. Anything? Answer phones? Whatever. There it was, the ask. Delivered without flattery, without guilt, without the practiced tilt of her head. Just naked need. Ironwood has a careers page on our website, I said. The application takes about 15 minutes. We review submissions every 2 weeks. You're actually making me apply. I'm not making you do anything, Chloe. For the first time in your life. Silence. 5 seconds. 7. Then a small, strange sound halfway between a laugh and a cry. I don't even have a resume. Then that's the first thing you'll need to figure out. I hung up. Sat at my desk. Stared at the Ironwood logo on the wall. Did I feel guilty a little? She was my sister. She was 24, broke, and scared. The part of me that had cooked Saturday dinners for a family that never said thank you, that part wanted to say yes. To fix it. To absorb another person's failure the way I'd been absorbing them my entire life. But the part of me that had built a company from a concrete floor knew better. Hiring Chloe because she was my sister would be the same system in a different building. She'd learn nothing. I'd lose the one thing I'd finally built, not the company, but the boundary. The line that said, I love you, but I will not carry you. Not anymore. 3 months later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Block capitals. The same handwriting Robert used on the 23 task list before Thanksgiving. No return address, but I knew. Inside one sentence. I went to the basement today. I saw the walls. That was it. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. No explanation. Just, I saw the walls. The walls where I'd taped my whiteboard plans. The walls where I'd hung my project timelines. The walls where Margaret's medication schedule had been pinned for 3 years. The walls where the water stain shaped like Florida had been my ceiling for 7 years. He went to the basement. Finally. And he saw what had been there all along. I set the letter on my kitchen table next to the pocket watch next to Margaret's letter. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it. I didn't call him. The door isn't locked. But it's closed. Helen told me later that Robert stopped raising the flag every morning. Not because he'd lost his patriotism. Because the routine, the precision, the discipline, the performance of it had lost its audience. There was nobody left to impress. Sometimes I think about that. A man standing in his front yard at 6 o'clock, raising a flag for a street that had stopped watching. It's the saddest image I know, and I wish I could say it doesn't hurt. But it does. Because underneath the master sergeant, underneath the display cases and the seating charts and the pressed khakis, there was a man who taught me to ride a bike in that driveway, who held the seat with both hands until I could balance, who let go exactly when I said I was ready. I don't know where that man went. Maybe he's still in there in the basement of himself. Maybe one day he'll find his way out. But my peace doesn't depend on his timing. The office on Main Street in Staunton has the Ironwood logo painted on the glass door. 14 employees became 18. General Whitmore's referral led to 2 new contracts in January. Revenue projection for the year $3.4 million. Daniel got a raise. He deserved it before the dinner. The dinner just made me stop overthinking it. Daniel still sends memes at 2 a.m. I've stopped telling him to quit. Last Tuesday, he sent one of a man standing at a podium with the caption, "When you prepared a 10-minute speech, but the truth only took 30 seconds." I stared at it for a long time, then replied with a thumbs up. He started bringing coffee to my desk every morning after that. Didn't say anything. Just set the cup down and walked away. Black, no sugar, the way I'd ordered it at every team lunch for 2 years. He'd been paying attention the whole time. I noticed on day 14. Helen comes over every Sunday. She brings flowers from Primrose, whatever's in season. Last week it was white chrysanthemums, and I almost told her to bring something else because they reminded me of the Thanksgiving table. But then I put them in a vase by the window and realized the flowers aren't his. The table isn't his. Thanksgiving isn't his. He doesn't get to own those things anymore. The pocket watch sits on my desk at the office, not in a display case, not behind glass. Just on the desk next to my laptop where it's been since the beginning, the second hand still stutters at the 4. I've never fixed it. Some things don't need to be perfect to keep going. Last week, Robert sent another letter. Longer this time. 2 pages. I haven't read it yet. It's sitting on my kitchen table under a coffee mug waiting for the day I'm strong enough, or maybe just curious enough to open it. Should I read it? Or should some letters stay sealed? I'm still deciding. What would you do? I'd really love to hear your answer in the comments. I'm telling you this story from my office on Main Street. It's a Thursday evening. The building is quiet. The logo on the glass catches the streetlight outside, and if I tilt my head, I can see it backward, ironwood digital solutions glowing faintly in reverse, like a word you have to learn to read from the other side before it makes sense. My desk is by the window. A real window. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Not a basement window half blocked by a boxwood bush. I can see the whole street from here. The sky, the trees, the world. The pocket watch ticks beside my laptop. Steady, imperfect going. My grandmother said it was for the one who works. My father said it belonged in a display case. I think they were both right, they just disagreed about what was worth putting on display. If this story meant something to you, please hit like and subscribe. Not for me, for the next person sitting in their own basement wondering if anyone will ever come downstairs. The next story is in the description. I think you'll want to hear it. And if nobody's told you today, your work matters. Even if the people above you don't come down to see it. Especially then. The watch stutters at the 4. It keeps going. So do I.